Ambassador Minjun Park sat in his chair at the Galactic Council chamber and said nothing. He had learned over 50 years that sometimes silence was the best response. Around him, the representatives of 47 different species argued about matters they barely understood. The Vrex delegate was speaking now, his scaled head moving side to side as he dismissed the latest human proposal. The humans want us to send mediators instead of peacekeepers, the Vrex said with a harsh laugh. They want us to talk to the rebels on Carthon 7. Talk. As if words can stop those who have already chosen violence. Several council members made sounds of agreement. The Torcan representative, a large being with 4 arms, leaned forward. Humanity has been in our council for 50 years now. 50 years of soft proposals. 50 years of asking us to negotiate and compromise. Perhaps they do not understand that some problems require strength, not weakness. Minjun felt Captain Jiwoo Chen shift in her seat beside him. He touched her arm gently, a silent request for patience. Jiwoo commanded Earth's peacekeeping forces assigned to the Council. Her soldiers were the most successful in galactic history, but nobody here seemed to care about that fact. The Council President, a Velran with purple skin, raised one hand. Let us vote on the human proposal. All those in favor of sending mediators to Carthon 7 instead of military forces? 5 hands rose. 5 out of 47. Minjun was not surprised. The motion fails, the president said. We will send the Torcan battle fleet as originally planned. Minjun stood slowly. Mr. President, the humans advised against military action on Carthon 7. We believe it will make the situation worse. I ask that this be recorded in the official minutes. So recorded, the president said with obvious boredom. Next matter of business. The next item made Minjun's stomach tight. A proposal to remove human voting rights on all military matters. The Vrex delegate read the proposal with barely hidden satisfaction. Given humanity's consistent opposition to necessary military actions and their obvious philosophical differences with the majority of this council, we propose limiting their voice on security issues. The vote was quick. 39 in favor, only 8 against. Just like that, humanity's voice in council matters was cut in half. Most galactic issues were now classified as security matters. Minjun sat down and looked at the data tablet in front of him. He pulled up files he had been reviewing for weeks now. Files that told a story the council did not seem to know or care about. In 50 years, humans had mediated 47 conflicts between council species, 47 wars that never happened because human diplomats had found peaceful solutions. Human-run refugee centers across the galaxy housed 3 million displaced beings from a dozen different species. The Interspecies Psychology Institute, founded and operated by humans, provided mental health services to mixed-species crews on 6,000 ships and stations. Without those services, life in space with aliens who thought and felt differently became impossible for most beings. Humans had written 90% of the first contact protocols that prevented disasters when meeting new species. Human linguists maintained the translation network that let everyone understand each other. Human peacekeepers trained soldiers from 30 different species in de-escalation and conflict resolution. Human disaster relief teams had saved lives on countless worlds when natural catastrophes struck. All of this done quietly. All of this done without asking for praise or special treatment. And now, the council was telling humans they did not matter. The session ended 3 hours later. Minjun gathered his materials slowly. Dr. Sarah Kim, who ran the Interspecies Psychology Institute, waited by the door. Her face showed the same tired frustration Minjun felt. They voted against the mental health funding again, Sarah said quietly as they walked toward the human delegation offices. 3rd time this year. They said species should handle their own psychological needs. Do they not understand that most species cannot counsel their own people when those people are living with aliens? Jiwoo asked. A Torkin cannot understand why a Pellaran is having a breakdown. They think differently, feel differently. That is why we created the Institute. Minjun nodded. They entered the human delegation wing and sealed the door. 12 human representatives were already there, having left the council chamber when it became clear their voice would not matter. These were the people who ran humanity's various galactic programs. They all looked tired. They all looked done. I think it is time, Minjun said simply. No one asked what he meant. They had all been thinking the same thing for months now, maybe years. We leave? Asked Dr. Kim. Just leave? We withdraw from all council operations, Minjun said. We bring our people home. We close our programs. We let the council see what the galaxy looks like without human involvement. They will not care, said Commander Park Seo-jun, who managed the refugee centers. They think we are weak. They think anyone can do what we do. Then let them try, Jiwoo said. Her voice was sharp with anger she usually controlled. Let them mediate their own conflicts. Let them counsel their own mixed crews. Let them save their own refugees. We have spent 50 years helping them, and they treat us like children who do not understand the real world. Minjun looked at each person in the room. I will not order this. It must be a choice we all make. Humanity came to the stars hoping to find friends, hoping to help. We have helped, but they are not our friends. They are people who use our services and mock our values. So I ask you now, do we stay or do we go? The vote was unanimous. Minjun spent the next day drafting a simple message. He rewrote it 7 times, making sure the tone was polite and professional. Nothing angry, nothing demanding. Just a clear statement of fact. The next council session was half empty. Some delegates did not bother attending anymore, now that humans could not vote on most matters. Minjun waited until the end, during the open comments period. He stood and walked to the speaker's platform. Mr. President, council members, he said. His voice was calm and clear. Humanity wishes to inform the council that we will be withdrawing from all galactic institutions, effective immediately. We will remove our personnel from all council operations within the next 30 days. We will close our various programs and facilities in an orderly manner. We wish you all well in your future endeavors. Thank you. He bowed slightly and walked back to his seat. The chamber was completely silent for a moment. Then the Vrex delegate laughed. Is this a negotiation tactic? The Vrex asked. Are you hoping we will beg you to stay? No, Minjun said simply. We are leaving. The Torkin delegate waved one hand dismissively. You will be back when you realize you need the council more than we need you. Minjun said nothing. He gathered his materials, and the entire human delegation walked out of the council chamber together. Behind them, he could hear the council already moving on to the next topic. They truly believed humans would change their minds. They truly believed humanity was bluffing. They would learn differently soon enough. The withdrawal began 48 hours after Ambassador Park's announcement. It happened quietly, without drama or angry speeches. Human personnel across the galaxy received their orders and began packing their belongings. They left their posts exactly as they had served in them, with calm professionalism and careful attention to detail. Captain Jiwoo Chen stood on the observation deck of Unity Station and watched the transport ships arrive. One by one, they docked and loaded human peacekeepers who had spent decades training alien soldiers in conflict resolution. Her troops formed perfect lines as they boarded, their uniforms crisp, their posture military straight. They were not running away. They were simply leaving. A Pellaran officer approached Jiwoo. His name was Vinthrex, and he had trained under human peacekeepers for 3 years. Captain Chen, please, is there nothing that will make your people stay? Jiwoo looked at the young officer. She had always liked Vinthrex. He learned quickly and genuinely cared about preventing violence rather than causing it. Vinthrex, your council told us we do not understand real security. They removed our voting rights. They made it clear we are not valued. We are respecting their decision. But who will train the new recruits? Vinthrex asked. Who will teach de-escalation techniques? Who will show us how to end conflicts without excessive casualties? You will have to figure that out yourselves, Jiwoo said gently. We left all our training materials in your database. Everything we know is written down for you. The question is whether anyone will take the time to read it and understand it. She shook his hand and boarded the transport. Through the window, she saw Vinthrex standing alone on the deck, looking lost. It made her heart hurt, but she did not look back. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. Dr. Sarah Kim closed the Interspecies Psychology Institute on Velran Prime. The facility had 12 branch offices on different worlds and provided services to 6,000 ships and stations. Sarah spent 2 weeks training the Velran staff who would supposedly take over operations. She quickly realized they did not understand the work at all. When a Torkon and a Pelleran are having conflict on a ship, Sarah explained patiently, you cannot just tell them to work it out. Torkons express anger through silence and withdrawal. Pellerans express it through loud vocalizations. Each thinks the other is being unreasonable because they do not understand the cultural context. Our counselors bridge that gap. The Velran supervisor nodded, but Sarah could tell he was not really listening. He thought psychology was simple. Talk to sad people until they felt better. He had no idea that most species could not even recognize emotional distress in other species, let alone treat it. Sarah locked the institute doors for the last time and transmitted the final shutdown codes. Thousands of beings who depended on human counselors would now have to manage on their own. She hoped they would be okay. She doubted it. Commander Park Seo-jun oversaw the closure of 17 refugee centers. These facilities housed beings displaced by wars, natural disasters, and political upheavals. Humans had always been the first to respond when people needed help, asking nothing in return. Now those centers were closing. Seo-jun met with each refugee population and explained the situation. He provided them with supplies to last 3 months. He gave local governments detailed plans for continuing operations. But he knew most of those governments would not follow through. Refugees were not a priority for anyone except humans. A young Carthian mother approached him on his last day at the Rigel Outpost Center. She held 2 small children who looked at him with large, frightened eyes. "Where will we go?" she asked through the translation device. "Your people saved us when our world burned. Your people gave us food and shelter when no one else would help. What happens to us now?" Seo-jun had no answer that would comfort her. "I am sorry," he said. "I truly am. But my government has made its decision. We were told we are not needed. We are respecting that." The woman started crying. Her children cried too. Seo-jun walked away feeling like a monster. Even though he knew the real monsters were the council members who had driven humanity to this point. The translation network began failing within a week. It turned out that maintaining real-time translation between 47 different species required constant work. Human linguists had been updating the system daily, correcting errors, adding new terms, adjusting for cultural context. Without them, the system started producing nonsense translations, minor at first, then increasingly serious. A trade negotiation between the Vrex and the Telmaran collapsed when the Vrex word for temporary agreement was translated as permanent surrender. The Telmaran delegation walked out in anger. Both sides blamed each other. Neither side realized the translation system had failed them. Ship crews across the galaxy began reporting unprecedented problems. Multi-species crews that had worked together smoothly for years suddenly could not function. Arguments broke out over nothing. Small misunderstandings escalated into violence. The human counselors who had quietly prevented these exact situations were gone. Nobody had realized how much they had mattered until they were not there anymore. The border conflict on Carthon 7 exploded into full war 3 days after the Torcan battle fleet arrived, exactly as the humans had predicted. The fleet's aggressive presence had inflamed tensions rather than calming them. Rebels who might have negotiated now felt they had no choice but to fight. The death toll reached 300 in the first week. At the council, members began arriving for their regular session only to find complete chaos. The human administrative staff who had quietly managed all the logistics were gone. Nobody had scheduled the meeting rooms. The agenda had not been distributed. Translation devices were malfunctioning. Files were missing. Simple things that had always just worked suddenly did not work. The president's assistant, a human woman named Lee Hanna, who had served for 20 years, had left behind a detailed manual for her replacement. The Torcan, who took her job, glanced at the 1,000-page document and tossed it aside. How hard could basic administration be? Very hard, it turned out. By the end of the first week, the Torcan was overwhelmed, and the council was meeting in a storage room because nobody had properly reserved the main chamber. Ambassador Park sat in his office on Earth and watched the reports come in. His desk was covered with messages from council members, from alien diplomats, from organizations requesting human help. He answered none of them. Earth's government had issued a simple statement. Humanity was withdrawing from galactic affairs to focus on its own people. No further explanation was given. Dr. Kim received desperate messages from her former patients. A Pelleran engineer on a deep space vessel was having panic attacks. A Torcan commander was experiencing trauma symptoms after a battle. A mixed-species colony was falling apart as residents could not resolve their cultural conflicts. Sarah forwarded every message to Earth's government with no comment. She wanted to help so badly it made her chest ache, but she knew humanity had to hold firm. The galaxy was learning what it had lost. The question was whether they would learn before it was too late. 3 months after the withdrawal began, a junior council member named Vinthrex stood up during a session and demanded to speak. He was normally quiet, never causing trouble. But he had been investigating something, and what he found made him angry enough to risk his career. "I request a formal investigation," Vinthrex said, his voice shaking slightly. "I request we examine exactly what humans did for this council and this galaxy. I request we discover why we drove them away, and I request we take responsibility for our actions." The chamber went silent. The Vrex delegate laughed, but Vinthrex did not sit down. Vinthrex spent 6 weeks compiling his report. He requested access to council archives, communication logs, and operational records. What he found shocked him so deeply that he barely slept for days. He had always known humans contributed to galactic society, but he had no idea how much they actually did. The numbers were staggering. In 50 years of council membership, humans had mediated 47 conflicts between member species, 47 wars that never happened because human diplomats found peaceful solutions. The success rate was 100%. Every single conflict humans mediated ended without violence. Every single one. Vinthrex pulled up the current situation on Carthon 7, the war that humans advised against. In 3 months, 30,000 beings had died. He found the original human proposal in the archives, a detailed plan for negotiation that addressed every concern both sides had raised. The council had dismissed it without serious consideration. 30,000 beings were dead because the council chose violence over patience. He looked at the refugee centers next. Humans had operated 17 major facilities housing 3 million displaced beings. The facilities provided shelter, food, medical care, education for children, and job training for adults. Since the humans left, 12 of those centers had closed completely. The other 5 were operating at minimal capacity. Vinthrex found reports of refugees dying from preventable causes: malnutrition, untreated injuries, exposure to harsh environments, people who would have lived if humans were still there to help them. The Interspecies Psychology Institute data was even more disturbing. Before humans left, the Institute logged 80,000 counseling sessions per month across the galaxy. Mixed species crews, diplomatic teams, colony populations, all receiving services that kept them functional. Since the closure, reports of violence on multi-species stations had increased by 400%. Ship crews were requesting single-species assignments because they could not handle the cultural conflicts anymore. 3 colonies had completely segregated their populations by species. Vinthrex found documentation of 17 attempted suicides on various stations in the past month alone, all from beings who had been seeing human counselors and now had no support. He found reports of murders on ships, riots on stations, and families torn apart by cultural misunderstandings that human counselors would have prevented. The translation network failures were causing diplomatic disasters. A trade agreement between 4 species had collapsed because nobody understood what anyone else was actually saying. 2 species had nearly declared war over an insult that turned out to be a translation error. The humans had maintained quality control on the entire system, catching and correcting thousands of errors every day. Without them, the system was degrading rapidly. First contact protocols had also been human creations. Vinthrex read through the detailed guidelines that prevented catastrophic misunderstandings with newly discovered species. He then read the report of a recent first contact that went horribly wrong. An exploration ship had encountered a new species near the galactic rim. Without human protocols, the crew had accidentally made gestures that the new species interpreted as threats. The new species fled, destroyed the scout probe that followed them, and had not been seen since. A potential new council member was now possibly a future enemy, all because nobody followed the human guidelines. But Vinthrex found something else in the archives. Something that made his blood boil with anger. He discovered internal communications between certain council members discussing humans. The messages went back years. They showed a deliberate campaign to diminish human achievements and spread propaganda about human weakness. The Vrex hierarchy had circulated memos claiming human mediations only worked because humans secretly bribed both sides. No evidence supported this claim, but several council members referenced it in their voting decisions. The Torcan Dominion had published position papers arguing that human peacekeepers succeeded only because they were paired with real soldiers from other species. This was completely false. Human peacekeepers often operated independently, but the lie had spread throughout the council. Vinthrex found communications where council members admitted they blocked human proposals, not because the proposals were bad, but because allowing humans too much success would make other species look incompetent. They had deliberately sabotaged humanity's efforts out of jealousy and pride. He compiled everything into a comprehensive report. Then he did something unusual. He released it publicly before presenting it to the council. He sent it to news networks across the galaxy. He sent it to government leaders. He sent it to ordinary beings on countless worlds. He wanted everyone to see what the council had done. The reaction was immediate and explosive. On Velren Prime, citizens gathered in the streets demanding to know why their government had driven away the species that helped them most. The Peloran homeworld erupted in protests. Vinthrex's own people remembered that humans had saved their species from extinction 20 years ago when a plague threatened to wipe them out. Human medical teams had worked for months to develop a cure, asking for nothing in return. And the Peloran Council had voted to restrict human voting rights. Smaller species who always supported humans began speaking publicly. The Zanari ambassador gave an interview explaining that human aid workers had rebuilt their colony after a natural disaster killed thousands. The Kelmaran representative revealed that human mediators had prevented a civil war on her homeworld. One by one, species came forward with stories of human kindness and competence that the Council had ignored or suppressed. The border war on Carthon 7 reached 50,000 dead. News reports showed the devastation. Reporters found the human proposal in the archives and asked military analysts to evaluate it. Every analyst agreed the human plan would have worked. The deaths were unnecessary. The Council had chosen this outcome. Multi-species ships began sending distress calls as crew conflicts spiraled out of control. A cargo hauler had a murder-suicide. A science vessel lost a third of its crew when a fight broke out during dinner. A military patrol ship had to abort its mission because the Torcan and Pelleran crew members could not be in the same room anymore. All of these ships had human counselors assigned to them before the withdrawal. All of them were functioning perfectly until the humans left. The refugee crisis became a galactic scandal when images spread of children suffering in the poorly maintained centers. A Carthian child died of a fever that human doctors could have treated easily. A Telmaron family froze to death when the heating system failed and nobody knew how to fix it. Human aid workers had maintained those systems, trained local staff, ensured quality care. Without them, beings were dying. The Council tried to hold an emergency session to address the crisis. It took 3 days to organize the meeting because nobody could figure out the scheduling system. When they finally gathered, the translation devices malfunctioned so badly that half the delegates could not understand anything. The Virex delegate accused the Torcan delegate of insulting his mother. The Torcan insisted he had said nothing of the sort. They almost came to blows before someone realized the translators were broken. Council members started receiving messages from their own populations. Angry messages. Why did you drive the humans away? Why did you mock their kindness? Why did you ignore their successes? Bring them back. Fix this. Take responsibility. But the Virex and Torcan delegations refused to admit any fault. The humans will return eventually, the Virex delegate insisted. They need us more than we need them. They will come crawling back and accept whatever terms we offer. The Torcan delegate agreed. This is a temporary inconvenience. We will adapt. We will rebuild these systems ourselves. We do not need human charity. Vinthrex stood up in the council chamber and faced them both. 50,000 beings are dead on Carthon 7. Refugees are dying in camps we were supposed to protect. Ships are requesting emergency assistance because their crews are killing each other. New species fear us because we cannot even introduce ourselves properly. And you call this a temporary inconvenience? The chamber went silent. Vinthrex continued, his voice shaking with emotion. I owe my life to humans. My entire species owes our existence to them. 20 years ago, we were dying, and they saved us. I have watched human peacekeepers risk their lives to protect people they just met. I have seen human doctors work until they collapsed from exhaustion treating patients from species they barely understood. I have witnessed human kindness given freely, expecting nothing in return, and we thank them by calling them weak, by mocking their values, by driving them away. He looked around the chamber at representatives from 47 different species. We need to go to Earth. We need to apologize. We need to beg them to return. And we need to promise that we will never treat them this way again. The Vrex delegate laughed. We will do no such thing. The council does not beg. But when the vote was called, 38 council members voted to send a delegation to Earth. Only the Virex and Torcan delegations voted against it. The smaller species had found their voice. They would bring the humans home, even if it meant defying the powers that had controlled the Council for centuries. The Council delegation arrived at Earth on a gray morning in October. 20 representatives from 20 different species, led by Vinthrex, who had insisted on coming despite his junior status. They expected to be received immediately. After all, they were the Galactic Council. But Earth made them wait. For 3 days, the delegation sat in a comfortable but isolated facility outside Geneva. They had nice rooms, good food, and no contact with any human officials. On the 4th day, a simple message arrived. Earth's government will see you now. Ambassador Min-jun Park met them in a conference room that overlooked the Alps. He did not smile or offer the traditional greeting gestures. He simply gestured for them to sit. Dr. Sarah Kim and Captain Ji-woo Chen sat beside him. The 3 humans looked calm and professional. They also looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with lack of sleep. The Velran president, who led the delegation, began with prepared remarks. Ambassador Park, we come seeking to restore the relationship between humanity and the galactic community. We recognize that perhaps we did not fully appreciate the scope of human contributions. We would like to discuss terms for your return. Min-jun studied the president for a long moment. Perhaps you did not fully appreciate? Is that how you describe what happened? The president shifted uncomfortably. We acknowledge there were communication issues and misunderstandings. Communication issues, Ji-woo repeated quietly. Her voice was cold. Is that what you call it when you mock our peacekeepers, strip our voting rights, and dismiss 50 years of successful conflict resolution as naive weakness? Captain Chen, the president started, but Min-jun held up one hand. Before we discuss anything, Min-jun said, we would like to show you something. Please follow us. The delegation followed the 3 humans through hallways into a large museum facility. The humans took them through exhibits showing Earth's history, the wars, the genocides, the environmental destruction, the nuclear weapons, the millions dead from human violence against other humans. The delegation members looked confused. Why were they being shown this? Min-jun stopped in front of a display showing images from World War II. 6 million of our people murdered in death camps because they were the wrong religion. 60 million total dead in that war. We did this to ourselves. He moved to another exhibit, showing the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We invented weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. We used them on our own species. Sarah led them to displays of environmental disasters. We poisoned our own air and water. We drove countless species to extinction. We nearly destroyed our own planet through greed and short-sightedness. The delegation followed silently as the humans showed them exhibit after exhibit of humanity's worst moments. The slave trade, the colonial conquests, the ethnic cleansings, the resource wars. By the time they finished, several delegates looked disturbed. They had not known humans were capable of such cruelty. Min-jun brought them back to the conference room. Now you understand where we came from. We learned our values through suffering, through causing suffering and experiencing it. We learned that violence creates more violence, that domination breeds resistance, that true strength comes from lifting others up, not pushing them down. These are not naive beliefs. They are conclusions we reached after millennia of learning the hard way. He activated a display screen. You mocked these values. You called our compassion weakness. You dismissed our success as luck or manipulation. But let me show you the cost of your decisions. The screen showed footage from Carthon 7, bodies in the streets, destroyed buildings, crying children. 50,000 dead in a war we told you how to prevent. We gave you a detailed plan. You laughed at it. Every single one of these deaths is on the Council's hands. Next came images from the refugee centers, sick children, desperate families. 17 facilities that were saving lives. You let them collapse. These beings are suffering because you decided human aid was not necessary. Then footage from ships and stations where violence had exploded. 400% increase in attacks. 3 murders in the past month alone on vessels that had human counselors assigned. The counselors who kept these crews functional are gone because you decided our psychology work was not important. Sarah spoke next, her voice tight with emotion. I have received 4,000 messages from beings across the galaxy begging for help. Beings in mental health crisis, beings experiencing trauma, beings who cannot function in multi-species environments without support. I cannot help them because my institute is closed, because the council decided mental health services were unnecessary. Jiwoo activated another display. My peacekeepers have a 100% mission success rate. 100%. No other force in galactic history can claim that. We achieved it through training, discipline, and commitment to de-escalation. You called us soft. You called us ineffective. And now your own forces are struggling with missions my soldiers could have handled easily. Min-jun pulled up the final document. Vinthrex's report, showing the deliberate campaign to undermine humanity. We know about the false propaganda, the lies spread by Vrex and Torkin leadership. The intentional sabotage of our proposals. You did not just fail to appreciate us, you actively worked against us. The room was completely silent. Several delegates stared at the floor, unable to meet human eyes. So here is what Earth requires before we even consider returning, Min-jun said. His voice was firm but not angry. First, full public accountability. The Council must formally acknowledge its failures and the suffering those failures caused. Second, the species who suffered because of Council decisions must receive formal apologies and material support to rebuild. Third, Council leadership must be restructured to give smaller species real voting power, not just token representation. Fourth, humanity's diplomatic approach must be formally recognized as valid and valuable, not mocked or dismissed. And fifth, binding agreements that guarantee humanity's voice will be heard and respected on all Council matters. The Velran president looked shaken. These are significant demands. They are not demands, Min-jun corrected. They are minimum requirements. You do not get to treat us the way you did and then ask us to come back as if nothing happened. You do not get to cause 50,000 deaths and then call it a misunderstanding. Vinthrex stood up. His voice was steady despite his obvious emotion. Ambassador Park, speaking personally, I agree with every requirement you have stated. My government has already issued a public apology for our role in driving humanity away. We have committed resources to help rebuild the systems that collapsed, and I want you to know that many species feel as I do. We recognize what we lost. We understand what we did wrong. We are ashamed. He looked at the other delegates. Some here will resist these terms. The Vrex and Torkin delegations refuse to even join this mission. They still believe the Council did nothing wrong, but they represent a shrinking minority. Most of the galaxy knows the truth now. We know that we mistook kindness for weakness. We know that we confused restraint with inability. We know that we took for granted the most valuable thing any species could offer, genuine care for others. A Peloran delegate stood next. My homeworld has recalled our previous Council representative and replaced her with me. My first instruction from our government was to do whatever necessary to bring humans back, to accept any terms, to acknowledge any fault, because without humans, we are less than we were. One by one, delegates stood and spoke. Each acknowledged failures. Each committed to meeting Earth's requirements. Each expressed genuine regret, not for losing human services, but for treating humans with such disrespect. When they finished, Min-jun looked at Sarah and Jiwoo. A silent conversation passed between them. Then Min-jun turned back to the delegation. Earth's government will consider your commitments. We will monitor Council actions. We will verify that reforms are real, not just words. And if we are satisfied that genuine change has occurred, we will discuss our return. But understand this. We will not return to the Council that drove us away. We will only return to a Council that has learned what it means to value cooperation over domination. The delegation left Earth that evening. They had a great deal of work to do. The council reforms took 6 months. It was painful work, filled with arguments and resistance, but the majority of species pushed forward. They had no choice. The galaxy was falling apart without humanity, and everyone could see it. The Vrex hierarchy and Torkin dominion fought every change. They submitted formal protests. They threatened to leave the council themselves. They called the reforms an overreaction to temporary difficulties. But for the first time in council history, the smaller species outvoted them. The power structure that had dominated galactic politics for centuries was breaking down. The restructuring gave every species equal voting rights, regardless of military or economic power. The old system where 5 major powers controlled all decisions was abolished. New ethics guidelines required council members to justify their decisions with evidence and accept accountability for outcomes. A formal review board was established to investigate failures and ensure lessons were learned. Public acknowledgement of failures came next. The council held a galaxy-wide broadcast where representatives took turns admitting their mistakes. The Velran president spoke about dismissing human expertise. The Peloran representative acknowledged voting against human proposals out of pride. One by one, species confessed that they had treated humanity poorly and caused unnecessary suffering through their arrogance. The Vrex and Torkin delegations refused to participate. Their absence was noted by billions of beings watching across the galaxy. Public opinion turned sharply against them. Citizens on Vrex worlds began questioning their leadership. Why was their government the only one refusing to admit fault? Why were they isolated while everyone else was trying to make things right? Material support flowed to those who suffered from council failures. Resources went to refugee centers to restore operations. Medical teams were dispatched to help beings in crisis. Compensation was provided to families of those who died in the Carthon 7 conflict. It was not enough to undo the harm, but it was a genuine effort to help. The war on Carthon 7 continued despite these efforts. 50,000 dead had become 80,000. Both sides were entrenched, full of rage and grief. Negotiators from various species tried to mediate, but failed repeatedly. Nobody could break through the cycle of violence. Finally, the council sent a simple message to Earth. Please help. Min Jun Park, Sarah Kim, and Ji Woo Chen arrived on Carthon 7 3 days later. They brought a small team of human mediators and no military forces. The planet's factions had agreed to meet, but nobody expected success. Too much blood had been spilled. Too much pain had accumulated. The negotiations took 6 weeks. The humans worked 18-hour days, meeting with both sides separately and together. They listened to grievances going back decades. They acknowledged pain and loss. They helped each faction see the humanity in the other. Slowly, painfully, they built a framework for peace. The agreement was signed on a cold morning in early spring. Both sides laid down their weapons. Peacekeepers from multiple species, led by Ji Woo's trained soldiers, moved in to monitor the ceasefire. Within 3 months, the killing had stopped completely. The war everyone said was unsolvable had been solved by human patience and empathy. News of the success spread across the galaxy. It proved what many had forgotten. Human methods worked. Compassion was not weakness. Diplomacy was not naivety. The quiet strength humans demonstrated was real strength, perhaps the most important kind. Sarah's Interspecies Psychology Institute reopened with full council funding and protections. The council formally recognized that mental health services were essential to multi-species cooperation. They committed to never cutting that funding again. Sarah hired counselors from various species, trained them in human methods, and began rebuilding the support network the galaxy desperately needed. The refugee centers came back online one by one. Human aid workers returned, but this time they trained local staff properly. The goal was not to create permanent dependency, but to ensure the galaxy could help its own displaced populations even without humans. It was what humanity had tried to do from the beginning, before the Council dismissed it as weakness. 6 months after the reforms began, the Council held its first session under the new structure. Every species had equal representation. Decisions required real consensus. Evidence and outcomes mattered more than political power. Min-Jun Park sat in the human delegation seat, but this time he was not watching from the margins. This time, when he spoke, people listened. The first major vote under the new system concerned admission of a new species to the Council. The Zalthen had been discovered near the Galactic Rim. Initial contact had gone poorly because of the failures months earlier, but human diplomats had patiently rebuilt the relationship. Now the Zalthen were requesting Council membership. The vote was unanimous in favor. The Zalthen delegation entered the chamber to welcoming cheers from all present. Well, almost all. The Vrex and Torkin delegates sat silently, their body language radiating disapproval. But they were alone in their resistance now. The galaxy had moved on without them. After the session, Vinthrex approached Min-Jun in the corridor. The young Pelleran had been promoted to head of his delegation, a reward for his courage in exposing Council failures. Ambassador Park, I want to thank you for coming back, for giving us another chance. Min-Jun smiled slightly. We did not come back for the Council, Vinthrex. We came back for beings like you, for species like the Carthians who needed help, for the refugees who had nowhere else to go. We came back because walking away would have made us the same as those who drove us out. We would have been letting pride matter more than helping others. That is what I do not understand, Vinthrex admitted. The Council treated you terribly, caused you pain, disrespected everything you stood for. How can you forgive that? Forgiveness is not about excusing what happened, Min-Jun explained. It is about choosing not to let past pain control future actions. We did not forget what the Council did. We will never forget. But we refuse to let that stop us from doing what we believe is right. That is the burden of being strong enough to be kind. You help even when it hurts. You show mercy even when it is not deserved. Because the alternative is becoming the thing you hate. Sarah joined them, having overheard the conversation. Our species learned something important through our terrible history. Revenge feels satisfying in the moment, but it solves nothing. The only way to break cycles of harm is for someone to choose differently. To choose compassion when anger would be easier. To choose cooperation when isolation would feel safer. That choice is hard. It requires real strength. But it is the only choice that actually heals anything. Jiwoo appeared with 3 other human officers, all looking tired but satisfied. The peacekeeping reforms are approved. Every council member just voted to adopt human training methods as the standard. Our approach is now official galactic policy. Min-Jun felt a surge of satisfaction. Not triumph, exactly. Just a quiet acknowledgement that they had been right all along. That kindness was not weakness. That patience was not cowardice. That helping others, even at cost to yourself, was the highest form of strength any being could demonstrate. A new galactic holiday was established the following month, Remembrance Day. Not a celebration, but a day to remember what was lost when humanity left. The 80,000 dead on Carthon 7, the refugees who suffered, the beings who took their own lives without mental health support. The names were displayed on monuments across the galaxy, ensuring nobody forgot the price of arrogance and the cost of dismissing those who tried to help. On the first Remembrance Day, Min-Jun stood before the monument on Unity Station. Thousands of beings from dozens of species gathered to observe a moment of silence. The Vrex and Torkin delegations were notably absent, still refusing to acknowledge any fault. But everyone else was there, remembering together. When the silence ended, Min-Jun spoke to the assembled beings. We remember these losses not to assign blame, but to learn. To understand that compassion matters. that cooperation is essential, that the soft power of empathy is more valuable than the hard power of domination. Humanity did not retreat because we were weak. We retreated because we refused to be complicit in your failures anymore. We returned because you finally understood what we always knew. Strength is not about forcing your will on others. It is about lifting others up, even when they do not deserve it, especially when they do not deserve it. That is the burden of being strong enough to be kind. The chamber was silent except for soft sounds of emotional response from various species, some crying, some making their species-equivalent gestures of respect, some simply standing in thoughtful acknowledgement of truth spoken plainly. Later that evening, as the human delegation prepared to return to their quarters, the Zalthan ambassador approached them. She was new to galactic politics, her species having just joined the council. "Ambassador Park, I have a question. Why do humans care so much? Why do you help even those who hurt you? What do you gain from it?" Minjun considered the question carefully. "We gain the knowledge that we stayed true to our values, that we did not let others' failures make us fail ourselves, that we chose the difficult right over the easy wrong. For humans, that is enough. We help because it is who we have decided to be, not because of what we might receive in return." The Zalthan ambassador nodded slowly. "My people have much to learn from yours." "And we from yours," Minjun replied. "That is the point of the council, is it not? Not one species dominating others, but all species learning from each other, growing together, becoming something greater than any of us could be alone." He looked out the viewport at the galaxy stretching endlessly before them. Billions of beings on thousands of worlds, all trying to survive and flourish in a vast and often difficult universe. It was not perfect. It never would be. But it was better than it had been. And tomorrow, if they all worked together with genuine respect and cooperation, it could be better still. That possibility, more than anything else, was why humanity had come back. Not for gratitude or recognition or power, but for the simple hope that kindness could build something better than cruelty ever would. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not technology or military strength, but the stubborn insistence that compassion mattered more than conquest, that helping others was its own reward, that being strong enough to be kind was the greatest strength of all.